You guys hear me now? You guys good out there? Do we have any audio? Maybe, maybe not. Someone give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up if you've got audio out there now. Still nothing. Okay, Mitchie says yes, we've got audio. All right, so big news. Obviously, you didn't hear it as I was going over it in the beginning. Hopefully, the mic sounds better now than it did. For those of you that caught the UNC Notre Dame game last night, I did the broadcast with Smitty, and I know that there was a little bit of issues. We think that it was Discord issues, but we're not sure. So hopefully the mic here sounds normal, and at least then we'll know that it was in fact just Discord. So if there's anyone that did watch that UNC Notre Dame game last night that is in the chat right now and heard the audio from my end last night and can tell a difference right now, do me a favor and let me know, because Smitty and I are going to get together and try to figure out what that issue was so that we can make sure that it doesn't happen moving forward. Mike sounds great. Chris Williams, perfect. Appreciate it. So I said this in the beginning. Obviously, you guys didn't hear me because the mic was on mute, and that sucks, and I'm an idiot. But I'll get over it. I digress. Huge news coming in the college series in regards to the transfer portal. I will have a little bit more information on that. No, it is not a name that you've heard yet. There is news around the college series and the upcoming transfer portal. Basically, what players are going to enter into the transfer portal, what teams they think they might be a good fit for. We've obviously heard Keno Thedford has mentioned that he might be transferring from Notre Dame. Keno Thedford looking at Baylor, Texas, Georgia, Miami, Ohio State, all teams that he might think about. There are some other players that at this point, I believe, choose to remain anonymous. So I can't tell you specific names of players, but I can tell you schools that they're on, and just know that these are some big name players, some more big names possibly entering the transfer portal. So that's something that we're going to get into a little bit. Obviously we mentioned Keno Thedford. Amari Harris said that he was going to transfer from TCU to Miami. Came here on the show. You guys heard him a couple of weeks ago on the show. Said 75% chance he's not leaving TCU, after saying he was 100% going to Miami. What other names, as we get closer to the end of the college series, what other names are we going to hear in terms of potential transfers? And are we going to see guys transfer to some of these schools that don't have boatloads of talent already? You guys know how I feel about this. You know that I'm a big advocate for going to some of these schools that don't have a lot of submitted talent. Schools like Arizona State, USC, UCLA, Florida State, Auburn, all schools that had at most one or two submitted players, if at all any submitted players. I have been very vocal about, if you're entering the transfer portal, look at those schools. Find a good spot and go to a school that you think you can win. Go to a school that you think, better yet, not even a school that you necessarily think you can win. Go to a school where you think you can show out, right? There are 2 or 3 schools that have less than a handful of submitted players at that university. And I can tell you for a fact that there are certain positions that if they were submitted players at those positions at that particular school, they would do really well. There are certain schools that you can look at, certain positions you can look at, that will thrive and will succeed. We've seen it play out in the past, and I would like to see people get into that. Do a little bit of research. Look at some of those schools that don't have those players. We've got, I don't know the legitimacy of, what do we got here? I don't know the legitimacy of this. Perhaps I could get Lito on the show, or perhaps we could get Savage on the show. But obviously, Lito Loso, a big proponent of Miami, having been an alumni of Miami, mentioning that there could be some Miami players entering the transfer portal. Big news centered around the transfer portal. Before we get into too much more, though, I do want to take a quick look, because a lot of the show is going to be centered around the power rankings, the Final Four rankings. So I want to take this time to go and look at the top 25 from last week, what the top 25 looked like heading into week 12. So I'm just going to throw this up there, kind of give you guys a chance to look at this. The top 25 as we entered week 12. Here it is. Miami, obviously, no one's going to gripe. First in the nation, 9-1 record, best record in the country. Georgia was in at number 2. West Virginia was in at number 3. USC was number 4. Oklahoma was number 5. Ohio State and Alabama round out the top 7. North Carolina was 8. Baylor was 9. Florida 10. Okay, at this point, we have now all but eliminated. I have all but eliminated 8 teams. In my mind, in my opinion, there's only 8 spots that really matter right now. And it's going to be interesting to see what the rankings look like, the official rankings, when they come out tomorrow. Because again, I said this during the broadcast. I said this during the game last night. I said this during the week. I've said this all year. I need to see something spectacular from the Georgia Bulldogs. And week in and week out, I don't think that I'm seeing what it is that I want to see, what it is that I need to see from that Georgia Bulldog team. And so you can look at the rankings right now and you can see that they're number 2 in the country and West Virginia was number 3 in the country. But also remember, Georgia and West Virginia did not play this past week. They didn't play. And throughout the year, you can look at Georgia and West Virginia and say, well, their record was always better because they hadn't had a bye and all these other teams had a bye. And that probably played into, and I'm willing to guarantee that it played into why Georgia was number 2 and West Virginia was number 3. If you look at it right there, Georgia was 9-2, West Virginia was 9-2. Everyone else was 8-2. The only reason why Georgia and West Virginia were 2 and 3 respectively was because they had played an extra game. That's it. Now, that's out the window. They have no longer played that extra game. Everyone has played the same number of games. And so you cannot tell me, you cannot look at these top 25 rankings right here and tell me that Georgia is better than West Virginia. You cannot tell me that Georgia is better than Ohio State. Ohio State beat the doors off them. Okay? I know it seems crazy for a team to be ranked number 2 in the country and fall in the rankings the following week after simply having a bye. That's not their fault. I get it. But I'm here to tell you they didn't deserve to be number 2 in the country to begin with. They were only number 2 in the country because they had the extra win. Same thing with West Virginia. Now, West Virginia, you could argue, was a little bit more deserving because West Virginia should have only had 1 loss. It was an unfortunate simulated loss that they got stuck with at the hands of, what was it? West Virginia lost to, Oklahoma State? So an unfortunate loss. It was a simmed loss. I don't take anything away from West Virginia. This is the dumbest thing that I've ever seen anyone say in my entire life. What grounds do you have for saying that Georgia is better than West Virginia? I need to give you the opportunity, because I apologize for saying that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life, because I've seen some really dumb things. But how can you possibly say that Georgia is better than West Virginia? They win games by like 4 every single week. They're a 5.5 or a 6.5 point favorite every single week, and they don't cover the spread. I went over this last week. In the last 6 games, Georgia has only covered the spread one time. One time they've covered the spread. And they covered the spread by guess how many? Guess how many points they covered the spread by? A half, not even a full point. They were favored by 5.5 and they won by 6. West Virginia goes out there week in and week out and blows teams away. They got an unfortunate simulated loss because there was issues with the mod, and they lost a heartbreaker to Miami when Tajay Gaddy threw an interception on the final drive as he was leading the team down the field to possibly win the game. And you're going to sit here on my show and you're going to tell me that Georgia is better than West Virginia? I should ban you from the show. Even AR-15 can't say that Georgia is better than West Virginia. I mean, I'm hoping that maybe that was just a foolish take, because I'm going to, hold on, wow. Okay. All right. So this is about to happen. I said we've got open forum. I said open forum for anyone that wants to come on and discuss the rankings. And I'm going to get into your thoughts and where you think the rankings should be. I'm not going to give my top 10, my power rankings like I normally have been the last couple of weeks, because at this point we're only a day away from finding out what they are. Or a week away from finding out what they are. We know what the conference championship matchups are going to be. I'm going to unveil those to you later on. I'm more interested in getting to that, but I do want to give you guys open forum to talk about the rankings and where you think they are. So I brought this up. This is what the rankings were last week, right? So Miami was 1, Georgia 2, West Virginia 3. My power rankings last week, I had Miami 1, Oklahoma 2, Ohio State 3, West Virginia 4, Georgia 5. So basically, I have Oklahoma and Ohio State jumping to where Georgia and West Virginia are. And that was last week, before Georgia sat and did nothing, played video games. Before West Virginia sat at home and played video games. While Oklahoma went out, blew out the competition. Ohio State went out, blew out the competition. USC went out, blew out the competition. Alabama went out, blew out the competition. All of those teams, and I get it. I get it that it's unfortunate. But I believe I have, let me see if he wants to come on. Because I have a feeling there's going to be some discussion. There's going to be some opinions. I've been very adamant throughout the season that I needed to see Georgia take care of business. And yes, you can say that they have taken care of business because they have gotten the W. That's great. But this is not the RFL. Wins are not all that matters. We are looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams right now that have the same record of 9-2. Wins are not all that matters. There's 6 teams that are 9-2 and 1 team that's 10-1. So we've got 7 teams right now that are 9-2 or better, and only 4 of them are going to make it into the championship bracket to have a chance at the national championship. So no, wins are not all that matters. There are other things that matter. Style points matter. Margin of victory matters. And I've been very vocal and adamant in my opinion about that throughout the entire season. And that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Jermaine Taylor to the show because Jermaine Taylor is arguably the best player to ever play at the university. So if there's anyone that I'm going to give the opportunity to convince me otherwise, then it's this man right here. So welcome to the show, Jermaine Taylor. What's going on, buddy?
What's up, man?
How you doing?
Pretty good, man.
So I assume that you heard the beginning. I've been very adamant throughout the season that Georgia has needed to show more than just winning games by 3, winning games by 5. Yes, they're getting the win, and that's great. And when you're 6-1, 7-1, 8-1, that's great. But now we're towards the end of the season. And it's not just about wins, because as you heard me say a minute ago, we've got 6 teams with the same record, and only 3 of those teams have a chance to get to the Final Four. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. You just left Georgia. You are now entering the RFL. What are your thoughts on this Georgia team? And do you think that they are Final Four worthy at this point?
If the season ended today, yes. We had the hardest schedule, arguably. And if it was an argument, we'll win that argument. We had one of the hardest schedules. We had one of the hardest schedules. The season's not even done yet, and we still got more rougher games than anybody else.
Right. I mean, you could make it a case that the hardest game on your schedule all season is the one that's yet to be played.
I mean, and mind you, we started the season off against the number 1 team in the country. Remember that.
And that's true. And that's true.
Regardless of where they're at now, I mean, we still got to look at the fact of where they were ranked before when the season started.
But that's paper champions. I mean, we're talking about paper champions, right? I mean, they hadn't been on the field. We hadn't seen them play, right? But I'm not gonna take away from the SEC and the difficulty, right? I mean, there's 8 teams in the SEC. That's 2 more than any other conference. So you're going to have more conference opponents that you play. And the SEC is a powerhouse. I mean, obviously it's a Power 5 conference, but it's a powerhouse conference, right? Like, I don't look at the Pac-12 as a powerhouse. I don't look at the ACC a lot of times as a powerhouse. The SEC, at least in terms of perception, is a powerhouse. And most people say that it's the best conference in the college. It's the best conference in college football. So you have more user submitted players that would want to go to these SEC schools, right?
Right.
And so if you have more players that want to go to SEC schools because the SEC is so great, then the teams that are in the SEC are going to be better because they have more submitted players. So yes, normally I would agree with all of that. But this year, Florida, not really very many submitted players. South Carolina, I think, had 1 submitted player. Tennessee didn't have any. LSU had, I think, the most outside of Georgia and Alabama. LSU had the most submitted players, and they suck. I mean, LSU sucks, right? I mean, they're the worst team, 1-5 in the conference. They're the worst team in the SEC outside. Well, Tennessee's worse than LSU.
Yeah.
Right. But LSU is just bad. And outside of Georgia and Alabama, they had the most user submitted players. So, Florida had a 5-2 record in the conference, and that's really good. But I don't think we were ever at any point this year thinking about Florida as having a chance to compete for a national championship. I think when you look at the SEC, and correct me if you disagree here, Georgia and Alabama were the only 2 teams that we thought had a chance to make the Final Four from the SEC. Would you agree?
Yeah, we was sort of expecting another replay, Georgia and Alabama, and it seemed like it's gearing towards that again. Even though early on, South Carolina had something to say. I mean, they gave us a loss. That was something that sort of shocked everybody, but they was a good team. I still felt from the games that I did see, I felt that South Carolina was not going to be there at the end. I just felt like they were going to slip up 2 games and we'll mess around. We'll see Alabama. I was just like, oh God,
Right.
because it was just something about how they played, even against us. I was like, we on our end, we didn't. We still haven't played a full game offensively, defensively. I still haven't seen that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I feel that we're a good team. I just felt like there's some games that our defense will play spectacular. Then there's some games where our offense get on the ball and we look like, oh, we can do something offensively. I mean, we won games early on. It looked like our defense was going. That's what we was going to hang our hat on. Then our offense started picking up now and started looking like our defense was almost like our weakness. And I was like, no, there's no way our defense is our weakness. We have, to me, one of the best defensive backfields in the college series, even though
Sure.
we was getting picked off a little bit, you know what I'm saying, by some teams. But I just felt like, no, I just think that I just think is the way certain teams have a certain approach. And then offensively, as you well know, I mean, it was like I remember one game I cannot even remember right now, but I remember the announcer was saying after the game and was saying, "Hey, Georgia was giving up too many looks to the tight end, and our cornerbacks looked a little bit suspect." And I was like, "How can a cornerback looking suspect?" I thought, really, realistically, I felt like the only thing defensively that I really looked at was like if we really had more of a pass rush. Not nothing against for me, because a lot of people will say, "Well, I did all this or whatever." You're not going to have too many guys get even 20 sacks in a season.
Right.
Let's just keep
No,
it
I
real.
mean,
You might
let's
have a
not.
guy realistically lead you with 9 sacks to 10 sacks. You know what I'm saying? The most being maybe 15. Okay. So, but I was looking at like if we had just that one dude, you know what I'm saying, who would give us that consistency on the pass rush, at least from the D line. Because once again, we don't really blitz our linebackers. We're getting pressure only from our D line. So I was looking at like once again, if we had a little pressure, it'll take a lot off our corners and safeties, because I felt that pound for pound, they're one of the best, if not the best, in the series. But I mean,
So
like I said, we got exposed. We did get exposed. You know what I'm saying? But I still felt like, hey, that little exposure only makes us better, because
yeah,
we still got tough games coming up, and realistically, we give a little bit. We show a little bit of improvement every game. You know what I'm saying? This is why the games are closer than anything else. I mean, but then again, I mean, look at who we're playing. We're playing very tough teams. While some teams, they're playing teams that, quite frankly, I mean, you should blow them out by more than 10 points and 20 points. Look good, have some highlight reels, put on some 150-yard rushing games and 300-yard passing games. Yeah,
yeah.
but
I mean, but you were down. You guys were down. You guys were down. I think 20 points to Auburn,
yeah,
and ended up coming back and winning on a last second field goal. Like there's a lot of people out there that would say that game right there shows you that this Georgia team, we've got to stop. Like you know this more than anybody. We have got to stop talking about last year's Georgia team in any way, shape, or form comparing to this year's Georgia team. It's apples to oranges. It's not even close. Last year's Georgia team was significantly more dominant up front with yourself. And like you mentioned, the 22 and a half sacks. There's no one on the defensive line that is anywhere close to the presence that you were. That's not Colin Minor. That's not Royal Taylor Luby. And even in the linebacking core, I'm not looking at Farrow and Justice as good as Alfred Walker or Jaquan Taylor-Luby. I think all around the defensive line and the linebacking core of last year's team was significantly better. But you mentioned it. This Georgia team hasn't hit their stride yet. They haven't put it all together on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And I agree. But my comeback to that to you would be, we've seen them play 11 games. What makes you think that anything at this point, they are who they are? This Georgia team is what we have seen. They are a team that will get down early and come back and win late, or they will get ahead. They will get a big lead. They'll let the team come back, and then they'll hold on and win in the end. They don't win by double digits. Yeah, sure, they played Florida and they played South Carolina, and those teams are good. But they also played Auburn, and I said this when I came on the air after that Auburn game. I thought Auburn was the better team. Auburn deserved to win that game.
Yeah.
So at what point, I guess my question to you is, Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma, USC, West Virginia, Alabama, all of those teams have the same exact record. How do you separate Georgia? How are you? Let's make the case. Miami is number one. Give me the other three teams. If Jermaine Taylor is making the Final Four right now, Miami's number one, and you've got three other teams that you can put in that Final Four. Who are you putting in? Who are those three teams from this list? Because for all intents and purposes, they're going to be from this list right here. Who are the three teams that you are putting in?
Well, I start off with number one team. They are number one. I'll give it to Miami. I hope they hold on, because we still got to play them. Something to think about again. See, we still got to play them. I mean, good God, I think don't we play West Virginia, for goodness sake?
Right, you got West Virginia. The West Virginia game's coming up.
With me doing this, if, like I said, I have to say, if we start right now, we still got those two big games with excluding the SEC Championship. We still have Miami and West Virginia to play, and those are the two teams West Virginia should be in.
West Virginia, you guys only have one game left. There's only one game left. The West Virginia game. The West Virginia game is the last game for you guys, and that
we play Miami. We'll be playing Miami.
No, there's only one game left. You had the bye, and then there's one game left, and then the SEC Championship, which will be against Alabama. So there's two tough games. You already played Alabama once, beat Alabama. West Virginia you have this week. So if Georgia goes out and beats West Virginia and then goes into the SEC Championship and beats Alabama, yes, then I can make the argument that Georgia deserves to be in.
Well, now based off that alone, now I'm a bias. I'm biased.
Sure.
With my team. Now, I still will go with. I will still put us in there. And on saying that, I would say USC. And if I'm going to put that final team in, let's go ahead and put Ohio State in.
Okay, so you've got Miami. What'd you say? Miami, USC, Georgia, and Ohio State?
Correct.
Okay.
Now,
so
and
Miami,
like I said before, that was based on, and I could have sworn maybe I looked at the schedule wrong.
I think the schedule, there was two schedules.
I could have sworn, yeah, so maybe I didn't see the updated one. I thought the last game of the season was going to be Miami. Okay, but okay, I got you.
Yeah, there was Asari Reese was looking at it. There was two schedules originally. Here's the note right here from him. There was two schedules originally, and then there had to be some changes made. The original schedule had you guys playing Miami the last game of the year, but then when the changes were made, it switched to West Virginia. So that's probably where you got confused there.
Okay.
But yeah, I can see. So you've got. I'll get you out of here on real quick, but I'm glad that you went through what your Final Four would be. Ohio State.
Mind you this. I'm basing this off of not just being a Georgia bias guy. Now I'm saying this in general because once again, based on looking at how the season is going, I mean, nobody expected Ohio State to lose the way they lost. Nobody didn't see these losses coming that certain teams got. So in saying that, I mean,
Well, Ohio State lost a tough game to USC and a tough game to
yeah,
Oklahoma. Both of those teams are fighting for a Final Four, so I'm not going to
yeah,
take anything away from Ohio State. I mean,
yeah,
the losses that they have are really, I guess, good losses. If there's such a thing as a good loss, Ohio State has
yeah.
two good losses, right?
And I don't get me wrong, I loved how USC has played, but it's just whatever reason. It's like last season I felt that we was going to play USC. I was like, yeah, we're probably going to play USC in the national championship, and then hold and behold, didn't happen. They slipped up. Um, it's just a feeling I have like we're not going to USC is not going to make it. And just based off what how the play has been going with everybody from some of the now I don't watch a lot of the games, but I watch the top tier teams. Those are the
Sure.
teams I'm watching.
Look, man, I don't expect you to go out there and watch Arizona State play UCLA. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
because let's
So,
be honest, there's no reason to watch that game.
yeah. So it's like I just sit there and watch it just a little bit or whatever. I'll probably watch at least the second half. If I don't catch the first half, I'm gonna catch that second half. And I'll just sit there and observe. Based off of what I'm seeing, Ohio State got a little bit more oomph. Ohio State got a little bit more oomph. You know what I'm saying? I see where my man was saying where he just loved how Ohio State played and how they were blowing people out and stuff or whatever. And even when we played them, I was just like, but I was more like, yeah. If we see them again, the jerk in me said, yeah, we could take Ohio State. The jerk in me says we could take Ohio State. Now, as far as but my want, I would rather see USC because it's just something about seeing USC, the aura of USC. It's the old USC Trojans, just to see them in the big game, if you will.
Right.
Then I see now not to be left out though. I do like Oklahoma. I do like Oklahoma, but it's just the way it's looking right now. It's like the teams that I think is really going to be there. I'll see a West Virginia be there before Oklahoma.
Okay. Well, West Virginia and Oklahoma are going to be playing in the Big 12 championship game. So the winner of that game is more, I cannot imagine. I'm just going to come out and say it. The winner of that game is going to be in the Final Four. The loser of that game is probably not going to be in the Final Four. And that's a tough pill to swallow
Yeah.
if you're Oklahoma or West Virginia, whoever is on the losing end of that game, because both of those teams are deserving of being in this conversation. So, Jermaine,
Think about last year. Think about last year, which is tough because I feel like I said to me, it's like they're so interchangeable. We wasn't saying that about Alabama last year.
right.
I was shocked Alabama got it. So it's like, yeah, I would like to see them both, but that's a whole nother story. You know what I'm saying? I mean, now we're getting into the whole thing of should we have an 8-man playoff instead of a 4-team playoff? So,
It's tough. So I'd be remiss, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you this question, because a lot of the players in the college series right now look up to what you were capable of doing at Georgia last year and the numbers you put up, and being the number 2 overall pick in the RFL draft this past season, going to the London Bulldogs. I got to ask, what are you most looking forward to as we get closer to the RFL season? Because we're only about a month away until you take the field as a pro in the RFL in your rookie season. Tell me about your thoughts as we head into the RFL season.
I am looking forward to seeing all my Georgia brothers in the league. That's what I'm like eager to see each one for everybody that got drafted. You know, what are we going to do when we get that chance? Because not all of us going to be starting, of course, but for the ones that's going to get a chance to play early, I want to see what do we do in that first game. I don't even care if we get if offense a couple of yards or maybe a few tackles here or whatever. I'm just eager to see that, uh, and I'm eager to see us go against the elite players in the RFL. That's what I mean. Like I want to see how how it is to play against the elite players. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? Then I want to see us grow. Each one of us grow. You know what I'm saying? Not just me, but I want to see everybody how we grow. I'm just eager to see that growth. You know what I'm saying? Because it's just we're coming in at a damn good time to come in the league right now. You know what I'm saying? We're coming in where the changing of the guard is about to happen. You got one of the greatest quarterbacks of the league. He's retired. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Yeah.
so it's like, who's gonna be the one that's gonna take over the mantle? You know what I'm saying? So and then I'm looking at my squad, and I'm like, I feel that it might be on paper, but I feel like we could play with anybody and hold our own.
Well, you certainly
So
have tons of talent, especially on the defensive line with yourself and Drew Brewer, who was the number one overall pick last year. So, really defensive line heavy in the last two drafts for the Bulldogs. I think you're not the only one who's excited to see what the Bulldogs are going to do this year. But I got to let you run. I got to bring someone else on. Again, real quick, your final four teams. Correct me if I'm wrong. Would be Miami, Ohio State, USC, and Georgia. Is that right?
yes, sir.
All right. Jermaine Taylor, number 2 overall pick from the Georgia Bulldogs, going to the London Bulldogs of the RFL, 1 month away from the RFL season and your rookie campaign. I appreciate you taking the time and coming on today, bud.
Yes, sir. Red Dogs.
All right, buddy. We'll talk soon. Take care, man. All right, so there you have it. Jermaine Taylor seems to think that the Georgia Bulldogs deserve to be in the Final Four. I just don't. I don't. I think that if you look at that list of teams that are 9-2 currently, as I mentioned, Ohio State, I think, is better than Georgia. They proved it on the field. They've got the head-to-head. Oklahoma, I think, is better than Georgia. I think they have, if you look at their resume, and maybe they haven't beat the same caliber of teams, but they did beat Ohio State, which Georgia didn't. Again, these are all things that you have to think about. Okay. Ohio State, in my mind, gets the nod over Georgia because they beat them. Oklahoma gets the nod over Georgia because they beat Ohio State and Ohio State beat Georgia. And it's not like Oklahoma's doing anything to dispel that they are deserving of being there. Sure, the first couple weeks of the year, they had to play catch up and come from behind and win. But Monty Wyatt goes out and not Monty Wyatt, Alan Mourning goes out, and this Oklahoma team is putting up numbers and blowing away opponents towards the end of the season here. USC, you look at this USC team. USC beat Ohio State. I think Ohio State is kind of like the barometer here for everybody. And I think that Ohio State win over Georgia is ultimately going to be the reason why Georgia doesn't get in. Because I don't think that Georgia is going to beat West Virginia. And if they don't beat West Virginia, they're out. If Georgia loses to West Virginia, they cannot, I don't care if they win the SEC championship. Miami's in. Even if they lose the ACC championship game to UNC, Miami is in. Then you've got to make an argument that UNC might deserve to be in because they beat Miami in the ACC championship. They won the ACC championship, and they have the same number of losses, or they have that extra win that Georgia might not have. But then you look at, okay, Oklahoma beat Ohio State beat Georgia. Ohio State beat Georgia, USC beat Ohio State. Right? So all of these teams, there's a common factor. Like, let's remove Alabama here for a minute, because unless Alabama wins the SEC championship, I don't think that they're in this conversation legitimately. Now, if Alabama goes out next week and beats Auburn, and then Alabama goes out in the SEC championship game and beats Georgia, then we have a conversation. However, if Ohio State wins the Big Ten, the winner of the Oklahoma-West Virginia Big 12 game, and Miami's already in, that's pretty much 3 teams that have already locked up. And USC is going to play Washington in the Pac-12 championship. They should be able to win that game. So let's remove Alabama here for a second. And Georgia's playing West Virginia this weekend. We'll see it on the field. But right now, we haven't seen that game play out. And so we can only look at the other 4 teams here: Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma, USC. I think it's pretty straightforward here. Of those 4 teams, Georgia is the team that doesn't belong. They haven't done much on the field convincingly. Yes, they have won. And AR-15 will tell you how to have a fantastic game against Auburn. Dude, nobody cares about your stats against Auburn. You played catch up. You relied on the deep ball. You had no short game. Your running game was abysmal, mediocre at best. You're going to come in here and you're going to talk about your personal stats? Come on, dude. Your team is struggling. Your defense doesn't want to hear about your personal stats. They don't want their captain and their leader talking about personal stats when their team is fighting to get into the Final Four, and probably on the outside looking in to get into the Final Four. As of right now, Georgia's not in for me. Georgia beats West Virginia, that puts them in the top 4. But then they've got to go out and beat Alabama, who they already played this year and won, yes, but are they going to be able to beat them twice? That's going to be a difficult task. Georgia has 2 difficult games left on their schedule. And if they don't win both of them, I can't put them in unless something crazy happens. There could be some crazy wild shenanigans that happen in the next 2 weeks, right? We've got Baylor. Doesn't really matter at this point. They're not really in the conversation. They're not going to be playing for the Big 12 championship. Let's just go ahead and I'll pull that up for you, give you guys an opportunity to see what the conference championship games are going to look like. I'm pretty certain that this is the conference championship matchups. I've looked at the conference standings. I've looked at the games remaining and the scenarios that could possibly play out. And this is what the conference championship games are going to look like. They're set. So here they are. We've got the SEC championship game, Georgia 6-1 in the conference against Alabama 5-1 in the conference right now. Alabama's got Auburn this weekend. Even if Alabama loses that game and goes to 5-2, Florida is 5-2, but Alabama's got the win over Florida, so Alabama gets in anyway. It doesn't matter if they lose to Auburn. So Georgia, Alabama in the SEC championship. Then you go to the ACC championship game. This game, the 2 teams in this game were decided last night when UNC steamrolled Notre Dame. Look, you look at North Carolina's conference record. It's not great, 3-2, but a win over Miami, and you have to at least put them in the discussion for the Final Four, depending on what happens ahead of them. The Big 10 championship, Ohio State. Right now, they are 4-0. They will be playing the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, you look at the Iowa Hawkeyes, they have a conference record of 3-2, and the Michigan Wolverines have a conference record of 2-2 with 1 game left. But even if Michigan wins that game and gets to 3-2 in the conference. Iowa beat Michigan earlier this year. And if you remember that game, it was very unfortunate. Austin Briley actually threw an interception leading Michigan down the field with an opportunity to take the lead. He threw an interception in the end zone with less than a minute left in the game, and Iowa was able to hold on for the victory. So Iowa's going to play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Then you look at the Big 12. West Virginia right now 4-1 in the conference. Oklahoma 3-1 in the conference. They've got Oklahoma State coming up this weekend. Even if they lose that game and they go to 3-2, Baylor is locked in at 3-2, and Oklahoma has the head-to-head win over Baylor. So it doesn't matter if Oklahoma loses to Oklahoma State. They're still in the Big 12 championship. Now, if Oklahoma loses to Oklahoma State, they might be out of the Final Four discussion, but as far as the Big 12 championship, Oklahoma and West Virginia will battle it out for the Big 12 title. And then last but not least, the Pac-12 championship, we're going to have the USC Trojans. They are undefeated in the Pac-12. They'll be playing the Washington Huskies, who are 3-1. Oregon, the Ducks, are 3-2. But if you remember, in that sloppy game a couple weeks ago, Washington beat Oregon. So even if Washington loses this week and falls to 3-2 in the conference, they will still have the advantage over Oregon. So they will get in. They will play USC. This is pretty much it, guys. This is what we have to look forward to. So looking at these games, right? Like, let's fast forward a little bit. Obviously, we've got the big game between Georgia and West Virginia that will take place this week. That's really the big one. There's what do we also have? We have Miami and Baylor, I think. Maybe Baylor plays spoiler and ruins Miami's chance to win 11 straight games. That would be interesting, but I don't think that really matters. Miami's locked into the ACC championship. I think even if Miami loses that game, they're not going to fall out of the top 4. And then they go into the ACC championship against North Carolina, who they've already beaten once this season. So here's a look at the conference championship games that will take place in 2 weeks. I'm curious. I'm going to go ahead and bring in, I talked about Austin Briley and that Michigan loss to Iowa, which really looms large right now because they had a chance to get into that Big Ten championship. Pretty much had they beat Iowa in that contest, they would be looking at an opportunity to play for the Big Ten championship. Didn't go their way, but I'm curious. Like I said, guys, this was open forum. And since they're not fighting for a Final Four spot, I want to go ahead here and give him the opportunity to come on the show, as Jermaine Taylor did, and give me his thoughts on who the 4 teams are that are deserving to be in the Final Four conversation. So, Austin Briley, quarterback of Michigan, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, I got you. How you doing, bud?
A lot better than was the last time I was on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you're feeling a little better, not so sick.
That COVID was so bad.
It'll get you every time. So
definitely got a lot of it fixed.
Real quick, don't have a lot of time, but want to give you the opportunity, since Michigan's not going to be playing for the national championship this year. You've seen a lot of these teams in action. You've played against several of these teams this year. Tell me who your Final Four would be if it was decided by you. If you got to pick the Final Four, who would you have in it? And I'll throw up some of the teams. Obviously, Miami with the best record in the country, but here's some of the other teams here. Who would you have in the Final Four?
So it's going to sound kind of counterintuitive when I say this because I've had a lot of conversations with one of their players, but the first team that I'm going to say is Ohio State. I think that is somebody who, even though we come against them this week, regardless of how the conference championship ends up, that's just a team that looks towards all these other people. And if they lose, it's close, but you can almost hold your breath and count that they're not going to. I agree with you wholeheartedly on Georgia being a team that I don't think is compatible for that top 4 spot. I loved a lot of what Georgia did last year, but there's just too many things. There's too many close calls. There's just too much. There's too much. There's too much blaming on each other, if that makes any sense, on that team, and that team dynamic carries over. And so I think, in a lot of ways, Georgia would not be able to go against Ohio State again in a top 4 spot and be able to, I think, come anywhere close to taking them out of that conversation. I think that game that we had against Georgia was a lot closer than everybody thought it would be. And I know a lot of people count us out, but that's kind of symbolic of what Georgia has been doing. I take Oklahoma out, not because of the fact that Oklahoma isn't a good team, I think, but I think there's a lot of if you remember back to the beginning of the season, there was that comeback after comeback, and then they played us in that 34-6 game, and everybody just kind of shut down on them. And I understand that they've come back a lot within their season to get the record they have, but I just feel like there's some intangibles of certain teams, like I was saying about Georgia, and then I include Oklahoma in that as a team that come put up or shut up time wouldn't be able to put up the necessary components to advance to a top 4 spot and then maintain that top 4 spot until the final 2, and then ideally become the last one remaining.
Okay, so you've got Miami, Ohio State, and then who you got 3? Who you got 3 and 4?
I got West Virginia at number 3, and I think West Virginia is a team that, even though they have been in the spotlight a lot, gets looked over a lot at the same time for a lot of the good things that they do. I think a lot of people forget that within the last year and the years before, West Virginia was a good team, but not this caliber of a team. I think Leo Moon did a fantastic job. I love the dude. I think he's a great quarterback, and I think he's going to do great things. But there's certain things that I've seen from Gaddy this year that just excel in certain ways. He's more of a leader to that team, I'd say, and not, like I said, not knocking Moon at all, but it's just there's something about that team this year that just feels different. You look at the logo and it means something different. You look at those players and they're doing different things. You look at Gaddy's big games with the 500 or so yards, but then you look at the completions and it's maybe 4 or 5 passes missed max. And so I think definitely with the way they play, they could probably surprise a lot of people in the playoff, in the top 4, and then potentially the championship.
All right, so last one. So you got number 4. Who you got?
I got USC. And I say that in a sense because, yes, USC lost to Notre Dame. But I think USC, being the first team that we played this year, that was the biggest tone setter, I think, for how I believed USC was going to play out the rest of their season. And I almost feel bad for the conference championship because I know how Washington plays. We played them, and I know how USC plays. I've seen the caliber of teams that USC has pulled out over by either a large margin or even a medium margin, and I've seen the games that Washington's played. I expect nothing less than a bloodbath for that game. And I think, like I said, Ohio State, West Virginia, Miami, and USC are going to be those 4 teams.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. So it looks like there could be some. I was under the impression that conference record was the end all be all, and then the tiebreaker after conference record was head to head. Since you have your conference record and every team has played every team in the conference, so if you have the same exact conference record, to me it just makes the most sense that you then go to the head to head as the deciding factor in the tiebreaker. But I guess I might be wrong here because I'm being told that actually, even though, and I guess you'll appreciate this, and I don't know if this is 100%. I got to find it. Both Amir Williams and Mitchie said in the chat, it's not going to be Ohio State or it's going to be Ohio State, Michigan, not Ohio State, Iowa. And that's because the overall record, you guys have the better overall record than Iowa. So I guess we'll have to wait to see that get announced. To me, that's shocking. That's great for you if that's the way that it works out. I don't think that's the way that it should work out. Yes, you guys are 6-5 and Iowa's 4-7, but if conference record is going to be a huge factor in the rankings throughout the season, and conference record is going to determine what gets you to the conference championship, and the conference championship game means a lot towards the Final Four, then I don't see why the head-to-head wouldn't carry a lot of weight. To me, that's a little bizarre to me. I'm shocked that that's the way that it's going to play out. But so keep your eyes out, because it looks like you might actually be playing Ohio State this weekend in the Big One, and then also playing Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship. So, Austin Briley, appreciate you coming on the show. As always, appreciate the time. Glad to hear that you're feeling better, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, man?
All right, sounds good.
All right, buddy, take care. So, yeah, I guess that's news to me. I don't know how that makes sense. It seems to me that the head-to-head matchup, if both teams have the same conference record and there's the head-to-head matchup that can determine which team is better, that team should get in. But I do understand that they played the same number of games throughout the season and they won more of those games overall. All right. So I guess Michigan was the better team throughout the course of the season, but they weren't the better team in the conference standings, so to speak. Right. So, in that regard, I guess we'll also have to look at then Washington, because Washington and Oregon is a similar situation where Washington could lose this week, go to 3-2. That would put them at 6-6 overall. And then if Oregon wins this week, they go to 7-5. That would be the same thing. And then it wouldn't be USC versus Washington. It would be USC versus Oregon. So I'm going to pull this up again, because I put this together thinking that it was going to be, I mean, it is what it is. This is the way it was going to be, but I'm being told that that's not the case. There was actually a different tiebreaker in place. It's not the head-to-head for the conference standings that determines that second spot. So it looks like it won't be Ohio State versus Iowa. It'll be Ohio State versus Michigan. And then also there's a chance that USC will be playing Oregon and not playing Washington. So again, we'll have to keep an eye out on that and see how that plays out this week. I don't know if there's any other conference where we have to worry about that. West Virginia and Oklahoma, both of them have better overall records than Baylor, so that's not going to change. Miami and North Carolina is locked. They are going to play each other in the ACC Championship game. And then same thing with the SEC. Alabama is in. Even if they lose, they go to 9-3 overall. And all Florida can do, Florida could go to 9-3, but Alabama would have the head-to-head. I think Alabama would get in anyway. So I don't envision that changing either. So the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 look like those conferences are locked. I do apologize that apparently the tiebreaker is different than what I had thought it was for head-to-head. So it looks like Ohio State and Michigan will play in the Big Ten Championship. And then there's still the chance that the Pac-12 is USC versus Oregon. Yeah. So here's, and I get this. So here's the official wording, of the rule and how the tiebreakers are put in place. And it makes sense. Like I get, normally in a real world setting, you would go off of the head-to-head, but obviously we don't have the same benefits of playing in a 125 team universe. So we have to go with what is made available to us. There are only 32 teams in this college series, in this league. So there are certain rules that do get tweaked a little bit. So again, here's the official ruling from Commissioner on how that tiebreaker is set up. Basically just in a series with 32 teams, it's more important to get into the Final Four. More wins are important to get into the Final Four. The better record team should get that extra game. And that makes sense. If you have a better record throughout the season, then you deserve the opportunity to play that extra game, because that extra game might elevate you to the Final Four. And that is a benefit of playing well throughout the course of the whole season. Look, if Iowa played Ohio State and Iowa won that game, it doesn't mean anything for Iowa. It doesn't matter. They wouldn't be going to the Final Four no matter what. And chances are Michigan's not going anyway, even if they beat Ohio State, but at least that's more of a discussion. Same thing with North Carolina. North Carolina probably not going, but at least it's a discussion. It's a conversation that we have to have. Certainly if Miami goes out next week and Miami falls to Baylor. Look, if Baylor plays spoiler to Miami next week, and then UNC goes into the ACC Championship and beats Miami, and Miami loses 2 games in a row, and now we're talking about a 3-loss Miami team, they're not guaranteed to get in. But again, that's unlikely. I don't think that's going to happen. But there are some scenarios that we will have to see play out. Again, there are 6 teams right now with the same exact record at 9-2. Oklahoma, Ohio State, West Virginia, Georgia, USC, and Alabama. I can make the case that the 2 worst teams on that list are the 2 teams in the SEC. Georgia and Alabama, I just don't think that they are better than USC, West Virginia, Ohio State, or Oklahoma. And so I said this earlier in the week. My bold prediction was the winner of the SEC championship is not going to get in. Because let's just look at what we have ahead of us. Miami has Baylor. Let's just say Miami wins one of those 2 games. They're in. Miami's in. So now we've got 3 spots that are still up for grabs. Ohio State is playing Michigan this week, and then Michigan again in the Big Ten championship game. Maybe Michigan could win. I think Michigan has a better chance to win now, knowing that they're going to play them 2 weeks in a row. But let's say Michigan wins this week. Then Ohio State goes and wins in the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State gets in over Georgia, even if Georgia wins the SEC. Why? Because Ohio State beat Georgia. So chances are Ohio State is getting in. They're certainly getting in if they win the next 2 games in a row over Michigan, right? And even if they lose one of those, even if they lose this week to Michigan, but then win the Big Ten championship game, that championship game will carry more weight. Then you look at USC playing in the Pac-12 with a 9-2 record, probably going to win the Pac-12. That puts USC in. And so now we're talking about Miami. If we were doing percentages, Miami is about a 90% chance to get in. We've got Ohio State, I would say, is probably a 70% chance to get in. USC, probably a 75% chance to get in, simply because the opponents that they have remaining are just not that good. They should beat the teams that they have left on their schedule. And if USC wins the next 2 games and they go to 11-2, they're in. So Miami, probably in. USC, probably in. West Virginia, Oklahoma, playing in the Big 12 championship game, is really going to come down to what those 2 teams do this weekend. Is Oklahoma going to bring their A game knowing that they're already in the Big 12 championship game? Do they falter to Oklahoma State? Probably not. So Oklahoma gets that win. They go to 9-2. The big game this week is going to be West Virginia and Georgia. I'd be curious to see what the spread is on that, because it seems like the spread is always Georgia minus 5.5. I certainly don't see them minus 5.5 against West Virginia. I think West Virginia is the better team. And I think when the spreads come out, if we get spreads this week, I'll have my locks. And I'm going to tell you right now, one of my done deal locks for the week, if Georgia is favored in this game and they are giving points to West Virginia, I'm taking West Virginia. I don't care if Georgia, and even if Georgia is +1, even if West Virginia is -1 or -1.5, I'm still taking West Virginia. I think West Virginia is the better team. And if West Virginia beats Georgia this week, that puts Georgia at 3 losses. And then Georgia goes to the SEC Championship game with 3 losses. And even if they win, they're not going to surpass Ohio State with 2 losses. And they're not going to surpass Ohio State with 3 losses because Ohio State beat them. So even if Ohio State has 3 losses at the end of the conference championship games, Ohio State gets in over Georgia. And then you look at West Virginia. If West Virginia beats Georgia here this week, they beat Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game, they're in. And if Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, but then Oklahoma beats West Virginia in the Big 12 championship game, Oklahoma's probably in over Georgia. And again, it all comes back to Georgia. Yeah, they may have played a tougher conference schedule, but they didn't beat teams the way that these other schools did. So I don't envision a scenario. The only way Georgia gets in for me is with 2 losses and they in the conference championship game. Obviously, they would have to be, they'd have to go 11-2. For my money, the only way Georgia gets in is if they're 11-2, they beat West Virginia this week, and they beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. And that's a tough task. But if they do it and they climb that mountain, they deserve to be in. For everything that I've said about Georgia this season, if they go out there in the final 2 games of the year and they beat West Virginia, and then the SEC championship game, they beat Alabama, they deserve to be in. But even then, that doesn't guarantee they get in. Because look, Ohio State with 2 losses. If Ohio State wins out and Georgia wins out, Ohio State beat Georgia. They're in ahead of them. Miami wins out, they're in no matter what. Oklahoma wins out. What that means is Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State this weekend. Then they go to the Big 12 championship game and beat West Virginia. And if they do that and they beat West Virginia, then that makes West Virginia more susceptible, more vulnerable, less dominant in the eyes of the committee. And that's a team that Georgia just beat. So if Oklahoma wins out, USC wins out, Ohio State wins out, and Miami wins out, where does Georgia fit in here? How do you make the argument that Georgia is better than any of those teams given that scenario and what I just said? Last year, we saw 2 teams from the SEC in the Final Four, Georgia and Alabama. Georgia and Alabama played each other for the national championship game. The national championship game was played between 2 SEC schools. And I'm telling you right now, there is a scenario where the SEC doesn't get a school. I don't know if Alabama wins out. I don't know if they're going to be able to jump Miami, Ohio State, USC, Oklahoma, West Virginia. I don't think that they can do it. And if Georgia wins out, again, they need help. I firmly believe that Georgia needs help to get in, even if they win out. Now, beating West Virginia will knock West Virginia down a little bit and might knock them out of the conversation. But they still have to worry about Oklahoma. if Oklahoma wins out, if Ohio State wins out, and if USC wins out, all three of those teams get in ahead of Georgia. And that puts Georgia at number 5 and West Virginia probably at number 6 on the outside looking in. I know it sounds crazy. And I know when I said this earlier in the week, a lot of people were like, that's a crazy talk. And that's bold. And that's why it's a hot take. Hot takes are supposed to be not the norm. They're supposed to be unconventional. And that's exactly what this is. I've said all year, guys, this Georgia team doesn't look great when they need to look great. And this right now is where they need to look great. They need to step up against this West Virginia team. They need to win the game. And they need to show something. I don't agree with this. The committee has proven they will pick the sexiest teams as far as offense if everything is equal. I mean, equal being a relative term. I don't think things are equal. I don't think that 11-2 Oklahoma, 11-2 Ohio State, 11-2 USC, and 11-2 Georgia are equal. I think Georgia is the inferior of that group. And quite honestly, I think they would be, and that's the only chance they have, because if West Virginia is 11-2, then that means they beat Georgia. So it's crazy. There's a lot of different scenarios up in the air. Week 13, this is the final week of the regular season, guys. I didn't do my power rankings because more than anything, I wanted to give a couple guys a chance to come on and go through what they think the Final Four should be like. I just kind of went over my scenarios and what I think should happen and what would happen given certain teams winning out or even certain teams losing here and there. But again, we've got one more week of the regular season. Then we have the conference championship games. Don't miss RFL Live tomorrow, because you will see the top 25 rankings, and that will give you a very good indication of what to expect if we see chalk in the conference championship. Depending on what the top 25 looks like tomorrow night, we're going to get a good idea of what the Final Four might look like if those teams win their conference championship as they should. So do not miss RFL Live tomorrow night. That should kick off right around 8:30. Obviously, recently there's been some issues and technical difficulties, and so hopefully those can all be worked through. But 8:30 tomorrow night, don't miss RFL Live. They'll have the top 25 rankings, as well as a breakdown of all the games. And again, I look forward to the games this weekend. The big one, the granddaddy, Georgia and West Virginia. There's so much riding on that Georgia-West Virginia game. So don't miss RFL Live tomorrow. Don't miss that Georgia-West Virginia game, whatever you do. I can only imagine that will be the 8:30 game on Monday night next week. So again, guys, a lot to look forward to this week. Appreciate everyone tuning in today. We ran a little bit over. This was a big show. I wanted to go over some of the conference championship games. I wanted to go over some of your thoughts on the rankings and the Final Four and what we're looking forward to the next couple of weeks. So really appreciate all the support. Really appreciate everyone in the chat tonight. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us at Miners RFL. On Twitter and at Miners RFL on Instagram as well. Smash that like button here on YouTube. And guys, really, again, is there anything that I'm missing in the chat? I'll go real quick once through some of the last things here. Let's see, any questions that I may have missed? Anyone have anything? Clemson did not win the ACC. Are you talking about last year? No, I think we're good. All right, guys. So again, appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, or in the Discord. If you want to be a guest on the show, by all means, reach out. We'll set something up. But until next time, I'm your host, Chris Dunn, head coach and general manager of the Sacramento Miners. This has been another edition of Miners Live. Take care, everybody.